The alarm started screaming at 3 in the morning, and Dr. Kevin Thross nearly fell out of his sleeping pod. His forearms flailed as he caught himself, his large eyes blinking rapidly in the dim light of the research station. The Valerian scientist had worked at Observatory Station Epsilon for 12 cycles, studying the gravitational patterns of dying stars. Nothing exciting ever happened here. That was the point. But now something was very wrong. Kevin rushed to the main console, his hoofed feet clicking against the metal floor. The other researchers were already there, their pale blue skin glowing faintly with stress patterns. Senior researcher Maleth stood before the main display, her head tilted in confusion. "It cannot be," she whispered. "The readings must be incorrect. What is it?" Kevin asked, sliding into his station. His fingers danced across the controls, pulling up the data. His breath caught in his throat. "The quarantine system," Maleth said quietly. "Something is transmitting from Sol 3. The room went silent. Everyone knew about the quarantine. 50 cycles ago, the Galactic Council had discovered the system during a routine survey. They found a species there, a strange bipedal race that called themselves humans. The Council had observed them for one full cycle before making their decision. The planet was classified as a Class 12 death world, and its inhabitants were deemed too dangerous for contact. The system was marked with warning beacons and the file was sealed. "Play the transmission," Kevin said. The audio crackled through the speakers. The language was unfamiliar, harsh and choppy compared to the musical tones of Valerian speech. But the translation software worked quickly and words appeared on the screen. "If anyone can hear this, we don't know who you are. Picked up signals from beyond our system. We know we're not alone. This is Earth calling. Please respond." The message repeated several times, then cut off. "They know about us," one of the junior researchers squeaked. "They've been listening." Maleth's expression was grim. "Send this to the Council immediately. They need to know the humans are trying to make contact." But before they could transmit, another alarm sounded. This one was different. This one made Kevin's blood run cold. "Crash signatures," he said, his voice barely a whisper. 14 ships. They just entered the outer rim. The crash. The nightmare that had been consuming colony after colony for 2 full cycles. The swarm that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be stopped. The insectoid hive mind that ate everything in its path and used the resources to birth more ships, more soldiers, more death. "Send a priority alert to the Council," Maleth ordered, "and get me a connection to the nearest defense fleet." The next 3 days were chaos. The crash tore through the outer rim colonies like they were made of paper. The Council's defense forces engaged them at the Thessar system, but the swarm was too strong. Reports flooded in of entire worlds going dark, of millions dying, of fleets being overwhelmed. Kevin worked without sleep, coordinating refugee ships and trying to plot safe routes away from the advancing swarm. But there weren't enough ships. There weren't enough safe routes. The Kresh were everywhere. On the 4th day, Maleth entered the communications center with a strange look on her face. "I need to speak with you privately," she said to Kevin. They moved to a small observation room. Through the window, Kevin could see the orange glow of the dying star they'd been studying. It seemed fitting somehow. "The Council has rejected our request for reinforcements," Maleth said. "They're pulling back to defend the core worlds. The outer rim colonies are being abandoned." Kevin felt his legs go weak. "That's billions of lives." "I know." Maleth was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to do something that will likely end my career, possibly my life." She pulled out a data pad and showed him a transmission code. "This is the frequency the humans were using. I'm going to send them a message." "That's illegal," Kevin said. The quarantine doesn't matter if we're all dead," Maleth interrupted. "The Council won't help us. Maybe the Deathworlders will." Kevin stared at her. The humans were dangerous. Everyone knew that. Their world was a nightmare of extreme weather, deadly predators, and toxic plants. They had evolved to survive impossible conditions. They had developed weapons that scared the Council's own military analysts. They were violent, aggressive, and completely unpredictable, but they were also the only option left. "Do it," Kevin said. Maleth worked quickly, her fingers trembling slightly as she composed the message. She kept it simple, knowing the humans' translation capabilities were probably primitive. "This is Senior Researcher Maleth of the Valerian Science Directorate. We are under attack. The Kresh swarm is destroying our colonies. Billions are dying. Our own forces cannot stop them. If you can hear this message, if you have any ability to help, please respond. We are desperate. She added their coordinates, tactical data on the creche, and a simple map showing the locations of the threatened colonies. Then she encrypted it with a basic code and sent it toward the quarantine system at light speed. It will take the signal 6 hours to reach them, she said, if they even have the technology to receive it. And if they do? Kevin asked. What then? Malith didn't answer. They both knew the stories, the classified reports that sometimes leaked despite the Council's best efforts. Humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought to win. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times throughout their history, and somehow they always came back stronger. Their entire culture was built around conflict, competition, and overcoming impossible odds. If the humans came, they would either save the Valerian colonies or make everything so much worse. 18 hours later, Kevin was dozing at his station when the console beeped. His eyes shot open. There was a response. The message was short and in heavily accented Galactic Standard, like they'd learned it in a hurry. Received your distress call. We're coming. Head of 72 hours. Hold on, Kevin read it 3 times. They were coming. The Deathworlders were actually coming. Malith, he called out. The senior researcher rushed over and he showed her the message. Her stress patterns flared bright blue. What have I done? Maybe saved us, Kevin said. Or maybe doomed us. I guess we'll find out in 3 days. Word spread quickly through the remaining stations and colony ships. The reactions were mixed. Some Valerians were grateful that anyone was responding. Others were terrified. The humans were coming and nobody knew what that meant. On Thessar 4, the largest surviving colony in the Outer Rim, Governor Pellin received the news with a mixture of hope and dread. The creche were already in the system, already landing forces on the surface. His defense forces were down to 30% strength. The evacuation ships were full, but there were still 2 billion Valerians on the planet. He stood on the balcony of the government complex, watching the sky. Somewhere up there, creche bioships were breeding more soldiers, and somewhere beyond that, human ships were racing toward them. Governor, his aide said quietly. The humans sent another message. They want tactical data on the creche positions. Pellin turned. Give them everything we have. Every sensor reading. Every tactical analysis, every scrap of intelligence. Sir, the Council has issued orders to maintain the quarantine protocols. Contact with the humans is forbidden. The Council abandoned us, Pellin said coldly. I'll take my chances with the Deathworlders. He looked back at the sky. In 72 hours, everything would change. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly 71 hours and 43 minutes after their first response. Governor Pellin was in the command center when the sensors lit up with 12 new signatures in high orbit. Ships entering system, the sensor officer announced, her voice shaking, reading 12 vessels. Configuration unknown. Mass readings are, by the ancestors, they're huge. Pellin pulled up the visual feed. The human warships looked nothing like Council vessels. Where Valerian ships were smooth and elegant with graceful curves, these were angular and brutal. Their hulls were dark gray, covered in what looked like scorch marks and impact craters. They bristled with weapons platforms that seemed excessive by any reasonable standard. They're not even trying to look peaceful, one of the military advisors whispered. The lead ship transmitted on an open channel. The voice was female, speaking in accented but understandable Galactic Standard. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Forces, commanding the UES Indomitable. We received your distress call. Where do you need us? No greeting, no diplomatic protocol, no acknowledgement of the Council or its regulations. Just a simple, direct question. Pellin found himself liking these humans already. Commander Chen, this is Governor Pellin of Thessar 4. The creche have landed forces in 6 major population centers. Our defense forces are nearly depleted. We have 2 billion civilians still on planet. There was a brief pause. Understood, Governor. We're deploying ground forces now. Stay off the tactical networks for the next 10 minutes. We need the bandwidth. The connection cut off. Pellin looked at his staff in confusion. What are they? He started to say, but the sensor officer interrupted. Drop pods. Hundreds of them, launching from all 12 ships. The tactical display lit up with descending signatures. The humans weren't sending shuttles or transport ships. They were literally dropping their soldiers from orbit in individual pods. sending them screaming through the atmosphere at speeds that would kill any Valerian. "They'll burn up," someone said. But they didn't burn up. The pod's heat shields glowed white-hot as they punched through the atmosphere, then deployed parachutes at the last possible moment. They slammed into the ground around the crash positions with impacts that registered on seismic sensors. In the city of Calith, the crash had overrun the defenses 3 hours ago. The insectoid warriors moved through the streets in swarms, their chittering calls echoing off the buildings. They were 8 feet tall with razor-sharp limbs and armored carapaces that could shrug off most small arms fire. The surviving Valerian defenders had retreated to fortified positions, knowing they were only delaying the inevitable. Then the sky started falling. The first drop pod crashed through the roof of an office building occupied by Kresh soldiers. Before the dust settled, the pod's sides blew open and something emerged. The human was encased in powered armor that made it even larger than the Kresh. The suit was matte black with orange highlights, covered in weapon mounts and sensor arrays. The faceplate was a featureless dark visor that made the human impossible to read. The Kresh warrior that had been closest to the impact leaped at the human, its bladed limbs aimed for what it thought was a vulnerable joint. The human caught the Kresh in midair with one armored hand, spun, and slammed it into the floor with enough force to crack the concrete. Then it raised its other arm and fired a weapon that sounded like continuous thunder. The railgun rounds tore through 3 more Kresh before they could react. "Contact," the human's voice boomed over external speakers. "Engaging hostiles." More pods were landing all around the city. The Kresh, which had been advancing in organized waves, suddenly found themselves under attack from all directions. The humans fought with a speed and aggression that the insectoids had never encountered. They didn't hold defensive positions. They pushed forward constantly, using squad tactics that confused the Kresh's hive mind. Coordination. One human squad set up what they called a kill box, funneling Kresh into a narrow street and then hitting them with overlapping fields of fire. Another squad used jump jets to reach rooftops and rain down grenades on Kresh formations. A third squad simply charged straight into a Kresh position with what one human called aggressive enthusiasm, their armored fists and powered blades doing as much damage as their guns. Lieutenant Marcus Webb led his squad through the commercial district, following tactical data that was being fed to his helmet display from somewhere. Every time they encountered Kresh, the data updated in real time, showing enemy positions, civilian locations, and optimal firing solutions. "How are we getting such good intel?" one of his Marines asked over the squad channel. "Someone up in orbit is running Overwatch," Marcus replied. "Just trust it and keep moving." They cleared 3 buildings in 15 minutes, killing 47 Kresh and rescuing 62 Valerian civilians. The aliens looked at the human soldiers with expressions that Marcus couldn't quite read through his helmet sensors. Fear? Awe? Maybe both. In one basement, they found a group of Valerian children huddled with what looked like a teacher. The younglings stared at the armed and armored humans with wide eyes. Marcus knelt down, making himself as small as possible in the bulky armor. He retracted his faceplate so they could see his face. "Hey there," he said gently. "We're here to help. Can you walk?" The teacher, an elderly Valerian with gray-tinged skin, nodded slowly. "You are the humans." "Yes, ma'am, and we're going to get you somewhere safe." "You came," she whispered. "After everything, you actually came." Marcus didn't know what she meant by after everything, but he didn't have time to ask. "Yes, ma'am. Now let's move." Above the planet, Commander Chen watched the tactical displays from the bridge of the Indomitable. The battle was going better than expected. The Kresh were fierce fighters, but they'd clearly never encountered an enemy that was as aggressive as they were. Ground forces report 60% of primary objectives secured, her tactical officer reported. Casualty count is 17 wounded, 3 serious. No fatalities yet. Chen allowed herself a small smile, yet being the key word. This was only the first engagement, and the Kresh bioships in orbit hadn't committed to a fight yet. As if reading her thoughts, the sensor officer spoke up. "Commander, the Kresh ships are moving. Looks like they're preparing to engage. All ships, battle stations, launch fighter screens and warm up the main guns. Let's show them what Earth brings to a fight." The Kresh bioships were massive, grown rather than built, with organic weapons that spat corrosive plasma and living missiles that could track targets. They had been the terror of the galaxy for 2 cycles, the Council's pristine warships, with their careful battle doctrines, had been consistently overwhelmed. The humans fought differently. The UES Indomitable and its sister ships accelerated straight toward the Kresh formation, their weapons firing before they were even in optimal range. They launched missiles by the hundreds, filled the space between the fleets with railgun rounds, and deployed fighter craft that flew with maneuvers no sane pilot would attempt. The Kresh bioships returned fire, but they were designed to fight enemies that maneuvered carefully and retreated when damaged. The humans did neither. When the Indomitable took a plasma hit that burned through 2 decks, it didn't pull back. It accelerated harder and returned fire with every weapon it had. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Kresh bioships were fleeing the system, leaving behind thousands of their ground forces to be mopped up by the human Marines. On the surface, Lieutenant Webb's squad was clearing the last Kresh holdout in Calith when they encountered a group of Valerian soldiers. The aliens were in battered armor, their weapons nearly depleted. They stared at the humans in shock. "The Kresh ships are leaving," one of them said. "We heard the transmission. They're running." Webb nodded. "Yes, sir. We kicked their ass." "In 4 hours," the Valerian said slowly. "You defeated a Kresh invasion force in 4 hours. It took us 3 days just to slow them down." Webb shrugged. "We had motivation. And better guns. Who are you people?" the Valerian asked. Webb looked at his squad, then back at the alien soldier. "We're from Earth, and we got your message." Within 48 hours of the human arrival, Thessar 4 was secured. The Kresh ground forces were eliminated. The bioships had fled to the next system, and the Valerian population was safe. Governor Pellin met with Commander Chen in person, in the ruins of what had been the planetary defense headquarters. The human was shorter than he expected, barely 5.5 feet tall without her armor, but there was something in her eyes that made her seem much larger. "Thank you," Pellin said simply. "You saved my people," Chen nodded. "That's why we came." "What's the situation in the other colonies?" "The Kresh are still advancing. The Council has pulled back to defend the core worlds." "Then we'll hit the next system tomorrow," Chen said matter-of-factly. "We need to supply and rearm, then we move." "The Council will not be pleased," Pellin warned. "You violated the quarantine. You deployed prohibited weapons." We saved 2 billion lives," Chen interrupted. "If the Council has a problem with that, they can come tell us in person." Pellin felt his stress patterns flare with something that might have been respect. "I think they will, Commander. Very soon." The Galactic Council chambers on Zenthar Prime had stood for 3,000 cycles. The building was a marvel of architecture, with walls that seemed to float and columns of pure light that held up the domed ceiling. Representatives from 47 species gathered here to discuss policy, trade agreements, and the occasional border dispute. Today, they were discussing whether to declare war on their rescuers. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in the center of the speaking floor, surrounded by tiered seating filled with alien representatives. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with gold trim, and he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, the council members argued in a dozen different languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up. The humans deployed weapons that violate 17 different conventions, the Trell representative was saying. The insectoid diplomat's mandibles clicked with agitation. "Kinetic weapons, autonomous drones, chemical agents. We use tear gas," Marcus interrupted calmly. "Non-lethal crowd control to separate Kresh soldiers from civilian populations. Would you prefer we used the lethal options?" The Trell's antennae twitched with irritation. "You violated the quarantine. You entered council space without permission. You sent a distress call," Marcus replied. "We answered. If we'd waited for permission, 3 billion Valerians would be dead." "That is not the point," the Trell shouted. "Then what is the point?" Marcus asked. His voice remained level, but there was an edge to it now. "Because from where I'm standing, the point seems to be that you'd rather follow regulations than save lives." The chamber erupted in protests. Marcus stood quietly and waited for them to settle down. He'd been briefed on council politics before coming here. The council species were peaceful by nature, evolved on worlds with gentle climates and few predators. They'd built a civilization based on cooperation and mutual benefit. War was almost unknown to them, until the Kresh had come. The Valerian representative, an elderly statesman named Keleth, rose to speak. "The human intervention, while unauthorized, saved the lives of billions of my people. I propose we grant them provisional membership and discuss terms of alliance. Alliance? The Trell was scandalized. They are Deathworlders. Do you know what their planet is like? Storms that can level cities, predators that hunt in packs, plants that are toxic to most carbon-based life. They evolved in constant warfare, first with nature and then with each other. And that's exactly why they could stop the crash when we couldn't, Kelleth said quietly. We have lived in peace for so long that we forgot how to truly fight. The humans never forgot. A new voice spoke up, one that made the entire chamber go silent. It was deep and resonant, seeming to come from everywhere at once. The architect had decided to speak. The architects were the oldest species in the council, so ancient that nobody remembered where they came from. They rarely involved themselves in day-to-day politics, preferring to observe and offer guidance only in the most critical moments. Their representative was a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, floating in the center of the chamber. We have known about the Deathworlders for many cycles, the architect said. We were the ones who recommended the quarantine. Marcus tensed but said nothing. We watched them grow, fight, nearly destroy themselves a dozen times, and somehow survive each crisis stronger than before. They are dangerous, yes, but they are also necessary. Necessary for what? The Trell demanded. For what comes next, the architect replied. The galaxy has been at peace for too long. We grew soft. The crash reminded us that there are still threats in the darkness beyond our borders. The humans are our answer to those threats. So we should what, unleash them on our enemies? Another representative asked. Let the Deathworlders be our attack dogs? Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but before he could respond, the architect spoke again. They are not attack dogs. They are survivors. They understand something we have forgotten, that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to overcome it. The humans will fight when fighting is needed, yes, but they also know how to stop. The council debated for 6 more hours. Marcus stood through all of it, answering questions, defending Earth's actions, and trying not to lose his temper, when representatives called his species savages. Finally, a vote was called. The result was 28 in favor of provisional membership, 14 against, and 5 abstentions. Humanity had a seat at the table, but the conditions were strict. Human weapons would be registered and monitored. Human military operations would require council approval, and humans would not be allowed to hold positions in the council's internal security forces. Marcus accepted the terms without argument. He knew this was the best deal Earth was going to get, at least for now. After the session ended, Marcus was approached by Kelleth, the Valerian representative. You showed remarkable patience in there, the old alien said. I thought you might strike someone. Marcus smiled grimly. I wanted to, but that would just prove them right about us being violent. You are violent, Kelleth said bluntly. I watched recordings of the battle on Thessar 4. Your soldiers fight with a ferocity that is unsettling. But we won. Yes, you won. Kelleth was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something, Ambassador? Why did you come? You owe us nothing. We quarantined your species, labeled you as dangerous, kept you isolated from the galactic community. Why risk your lives for us? Marcus thought about that question. He'd been asked it a dozen times since the fleet had left Earth, and he still wasn't sure he had a good answer. Because you needed help, he said finally. Because we could help. And because we remember what it's like to face extinction and have nobody come to save you. Kelleth's stress patterns flickered in a way Marcus had learned meant sadness. Your species has faced extinction? Several times. War, disease, climate disaster. We came close to ending ourselves more than once. But we survived. And I think part of surviving means helping others do the same. Even when those others have treated you poorly, especially then, Marcus said. Someone has to break the cycle. While the council debated politics, Commander Chen was dealing with more practical matters. She stood in the retrofit bay of Zenthar Prime's largest space dock, watching human engineers swarm over a council warship like ants on a carcass. The Valerian captain of the ship, a young officer named Threll, looked uncomfortable. Your engineers are very enthusiastic, he said diplomatically. Chen smiled. They're excited. Council technology is impressive, but it's not built for combat. Not real combat. What do you mean? Chen walked over to a display showing the ship's power distribution system. Look at this. Your main reactor is incredibly efficient. Generates massive amounts of power with almost no waste, but it has no redundancy. If it takes a hit, the whole ship goes dark. The likelihood of the reactor being hit is very small, Threll protested. The ship's shields will fail eventually, Chen interrupted. In a real fight, you assume everything will get hit. You build in backups, redundancies, multiple systems that can take over if the primary fails. She pulled up another schematic. Your weapons are designed to disable enemy ships, not destroy them. That's admirable from a moral standpoint, but it means fights last longer and you take more damage. Our weapons are designed to kill fast. Threll looked disturbed. That seems excessive. It's efficient, Chen corrected. The faster you end a fight, the fewer people die on both sides. A disabled ship can still fire on you. A destroyed ship can't, one of the human engineers called out. Commander, come look at this. Chen walked over to where the engineer was examining the ship's hull plating. The young woman, Specialist Rodriguez, was shaking her head in disbelief. This armor is beautiful, Rodriguez said. Molecularly bonded, self-repairing, incredibly lightweight. But it's only 3 centimeters thick in most places. Is that not sufficient? Threll asked. For defense against pirates and small weapons, sure, Rodriguez said. But against military-grade weapons? Against the kind of plasma cannons the Kresh use? This would get burned through in seconds. Our shields provide the primary defense, Threll explained. The armor is merely a backup. But when your shields fail, and they will fail, you need armor that can take hits, Chen said. Real, thick, redundant layers of protection. Your ships are very heavy, Threll observed. Does this not make them slower? Yes, Chen admitted. But they can take punishment and keep fighting. In our experience, it's better to be tough and slow than fast and fragile. Threll was quiet for a moment, watching the human engineers work. They moved with practiced efficiency, installing additional power conduits, reinforcing structural points, and adding what they called emergency access panels to critical systems. You have thought about this a great deal, he said finally. Ship design, combat tactics, survival strategies. Your entire civilization is built around conflict. Built around surviving conflict, Chen corrected. There's a difference. We don't seek out fights, Captain, but when fights find us, we make damn sure we win. And if you cannot win, Chen's expression hardened, then we make sure the enemy pays such a high price that they regret starting the fight in the first place. That's the real secret to victory, Captain. Make yourself too expensive to fight. The intelligence briefing lasted 3 hours, and by the end of it, the council chamber was dead silent. Captain Threll stood at the central holographic display, showing the data his reconnaissance team had gathered. What they'd found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Kresh home system, Threll said, his voice shaking slightly. We've known its location for half a cycle, but we've never been able to scout it properly. Any ship that went in never came back. Until now. The hologram showed a massive structure at the center of the system. It was roughly spherical, about the size of a small moon, but it wasn't made of rock or metal. It was alive. The surface pulsed with organic growth, and thousands of bioships could be seen attached to it like offspring nursing from their mother. The Hive Queen, Threll continued. She's not just commanding the swarm, she is the swarm. Every Kresh soldier, every bioship, they're all extensions of her consciousness. Kill her and the entire swarm collapses. How do we know this? Asked the Trell representative. Because the humans captured a Kresh warrior and somehow got it to communicate before it died, Threll said, gesturing to where Commander Chen sat with the other military advisors. They learned things in 3 days that we failed to discover in 2 cycles. One of the council members stood. Even if this intelligence is accurate, what difference does it make? The home system is the most heavily defended location in Kresh space. Our simulations show that any attack force would be destroyed long before reaching the Hive Queen. Admiral James Okonkwo rose from his seat. He was a tall man, his dark skin marked with old scars, his gray hair cut military short. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 4 decades of military service. Your simulations are based on council tactics, he said. Defensive postures, minimal risk, careful engagement. We do things differently. What are you proposing? Calith asked. A decapitation strike, Okonkwo said bluntly. We take everything we have, punch straight through their defenses, and destroy the Hive Queen. Fast, brutal, and final. The chamber erupted in protests. That's suicide. The casualties would be catastrophic. We can't just throw away lives like that. Okonkwo waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. The Kresh have consumed 14 colony worlds in the past 2 cycles. They've killed over 40 billion sentients, and they're not stopping. Every day we wait, they breed more ships, more soldiers, more of everything. We can fight them defensively forever and lose slowly, or we can take the fight to them and end it. Even if we agree, the architect's voice resonated through the chamber, the cost would be immense. Our projections show that at least 60% of any attack fleet would be destroyed. Millions of casualties. I'm aware of the cost, Okonkwo said quietly, and I'm willing to pay it. The question is, are you? The council voted to approve the operation, but only by a narrow margin. Many representatives abstained, unwilling to authorize what they saw as mass suicide. But the Valerians voted unanimously in favor, as did several other species that had lost worlds to the Kresh. Earth didn't wait for the final vote. Admiral Okonkwo had already sent the recall order. Every human ship in the galaxy, every marine, every pilot, every soldier who could be spared was being called up. This wasn't going to be a police action or a rescue mission. This was war. 3 weeks later, the human fleet assembled at the staging point. 16 full battle groups, over 200 warships, supported by logistics vessels and medical ships. It was the largest military force Earth had ever deployed off-world. The Valerians sent an observation fleet to accompany them. Captain Threll was given command of the lead observation ship, a fast courier designed to stay safe behind the lines and record what happened. He stood on his bridge and watched the human fleet organize itself with mechanical precision. His second officer, a young Valerian named Kess, was monitoring the human communications channels. "They're singing," she said suddenly. "What?" Threll looked at her in confusion. "The humans. On some of the ships. They're singing songs." Threll switched his display to show video feeds from several human vessels. It was true. On the UES Indomitable, Marines in the armory were singing together while they loaded equipment. On the UES Defiant, crew members in the mess hall were harmonizing some kind of group song. Why would they sing before battle? Kess wondered. "I don't know," Threll said, but he found it oddly comforting. These Deathworlders, these violent warriors from a harsh world, they sang together. They were people, not just weapons. On the Indomitable, Commander Sarah Chen was in her quarters writing letters, one for each member of her family, just in case. She'd done this before every major deployment for 15 years, but it never got easier. A knock on her door interrupted her. "Come in," she called. Lieutenant Marcus Webb entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to bother you, Commander. Just wanted to check in before we jump." "You writing letters too?" Chen asked. Marcus nodded. "Third draft. Can't seem to get the words right." "What do you say to people when you might not come back?" "That you love them," Chen said simply. "That you're doing this for a good reason, and that you don't regret it even if things go wrong." "Do you regret it? Coming all the way out here to fight someone else's war?" Chen thought about that. "No, but I'm scared as hell." "You?" Marcus looked surprised. "You always seem so calm." "That's the job," Chen said with a tired smile. "Someone has to look confident. Might as well be me. But between you and me, Webb, I'm terrified. We're about to charge into the most heavily defended system in the galaxy, and I have no idea if we're going to survive." "Why do it then?" "Because someone has to. Because if we don't, the Kresh will keep killing. And because," she paused, "because I think this is what humanity is for. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars and near-extinction events. We clawed our way to the top of Earth's food chain through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Maybe that's our purpose out here, to be the ones who don't give up, even when the smart thing would be to run." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's either very inspiring or completely insane." "Probably both," Chen agreed. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel in a coordinated sequence that took 6 hours. They would arrive at the Kresh home system in 2 days. During the journey, Admiral Okonkwo held briefings with every ship captain, going over the battle plan again and again. "The key is speed," he emphasized. "We can't get bogged down fighting every defensive position. We punch through, we stay mobile, and we focus everything on the Hive Queen. The Kresh will throw everything they have at us, and we're going to take casualties. Heavy casualties. But if we can destroy the Queen, it's over." Captain Threll attended these briefings from his observation ship. He was struck by how matter-of-fact the humans were about the upcoming battle. They discussed casualty projections the way his people discussed weather patterns. They planned for the loss of entire ships with calm professionalism. He cornered Admiral Okonkwo after one briefing. "How can you be so calm? We're projecting 40% fleet losses minimum. That's tens of thousands of your people who will die." Okonkwo's expression was grave. "I'm not calm, Captain. I'm focused. There's a difference. If I let myself think too much about the cost, I'll freeze up. So I focus on the mission. I focus on what needs to be done. The emotions can come later. And if you don't survive for there to be a later, then someone else will mourn for me," Okonkwo said simply. That's how it works. On the final day before the assault, the chaplains held services for those who wanted them. Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, and a dozen other faiths. The multi-faith chapel on the Indomitable was packed for every service. Chen attended the secular memorial service, where people gathered simply to acknowledge what they were about to do. No religious component, just soldiers being honest with each other. "I'm scared," one young Marine admitted. "I keep thinking about my family, about all the things I haven't done yet." "We're all scared," an older sergeant said. "Anyone who says they're not is lying. But being scared doesn't mean we can't do this." "Why are we doing this?" another Marine asked. "Really? Why did we volunteer to come all the way out here?" The room was quiet for a moment. Then Chen spoke up. "Because someone sent a distress call and we answered," she said. "Because there are people in this galaxy worth fighting for. And because if we don't stand up to the darkness, who will?" The Marines nodded. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was enough. The fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Kresh home system. Sensors immediately lit up with contacts. Thousands of them. The Kresh had assembled every bioship they could, creating a defensive sphere around their home world. Admiral Okonkwo looked at the tactical display for a long moment. Then he opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Okonkwo. You know the mission. You know the cost. I won't lie to you and say this will be easy. But I will tell you this, today we end the Kresh swarm. Today we show them that there are consequences for attacking peaceful people. Today we remind the galaxy why Earth survived when so many species fell. All ships weapons free. Show them what we are." The fleet accelerated toward the Kresh defenses. On the Indomitable's bridge, someone started singing. It was an old song, one that soldiers had sung for centuries. Other voices joined in, and the human fleet went to war. The battle lasted 6 days. Captain Threll watched all of it from his observation ship, and he knew he would see those images in his dreams for the rest of his life. The first day was chaos. The human fleet drove straight into the Kresh defensive sphere like a spear thrust into flesh. They lost 20 ships in the first 4 hours, but they didn't slow down. They didn't retreat. They just kept pushing forward, their weapons firing constantly, their pilots flying with a reckless courage that seemed like madness. The Kresh swarmed them from all sides. Bioships by the thousands, each one a living weapon bred for war. They spat plasma that burned through armor, launched living missiles that tracked targets with eerie precision, and used ramming attacks when their weapons ran dry. The space around the human fleet became a graveyard of shattered hulls and burning debris. But the humans fought back with a ferocity that made the Kresh seem timid by comparison. When the UES Valiant lost its main engines to a plasma strike, it didn't surrender. It used its maneuvering thrusters to spin in place, bringing undamaged weapon batteries to bear while the crew worked frantically to restore power. When the UES Thunder took critical damage to its bridge, the executive officer took command from engineering and kept the ship in the fight for another 6 hours before it finally had to withdraw. Commander Sarah Chen's Marine forces deployed on the 3rd day, using boarding pods to assault the Hive Queen directly. 3,000 Marines in drop pods launched from ships that were already taking heavy fire. Threll watched in disbelief as the pods punched through swarms of Kresh defenders, some of them being destroyed in flight but most making it through to slam into the organic surface of the massive hive structure. The Marines carved their way inside using plasma cutters and explosives, fighting through corridors of living flesh while the Hive Queen's immune system literally tried to digest them. They pushed deeper and deeper, taking casualties with every meter. But never stopping. Chen led her battalion through what her team was calling the meat grinder, a chamber where Kresh warriors spawned directly from the walls to attack them. Her armor was scorched black from plasma hits and her right arm was broken, but she kept moving forward. "Command, this is Chen," she reported over the tactical net. We're approaching what looks like the central chamber. Heavy resistance, but we're still advancing. Understood, Commander. Admiral Okonkwo's voice crackled back. The fleet is down to 62% combat effective. We can give you 6 more hours, maybe 8. After that, we won't have enough ships to maintain the perimeter. Copy that, Admiral. We'll get it done. Lieutenant Marcus Webb fought beside Chen, his squad reduced to half strength but still operational. They'd been fighting for 3 days straight, surviving on stimulants and adrenaline. He saw one of his Marines, a young man named Thompson, take a Kresh blade through the chest. Thompson didn't die immediately. He grabbed the Kresh warrior with his last strength and detonated a grenade, taking the alien with him. Keep moving, Chen shouted. We're almost there. They blasted through a final wall of organic tissue and found themselves in a chamber so large they couldn't see the far side. In the center, suspended in strands of bioorganic material, was the Hive Queen. She was massive, at least 200 meters long, her body bloated with the eggs that would become new Kresh warriors. But she was also ancient and intelligent. When she spoke, the words came not as sound but as a psychic pressure that made the Marines' heads ache. Deathworlders, the Queen's voice echoed in their minds. You are strong, stronger than the soft species that fill this galaxy. Join us. Serve the swarm, and together we will consume all that is weak. Hard pass, Chen said and raised her weapon. The Queen screamed, a psychic shriek that dropped half the Marines to their knees. Kresh warriors poured into the chamber from every opening. A final desperate defense. But the humans had come too far to be stopped now. They laid down a wall of fire that held back the Kresh tide for precious seconds. Chen and a dozen other Marines with heavy weapons focused everything they had on the Queen herself. Plasma cutters burned through her protective membrane. Explosives tore into her vital organs. High-powered railguns punched holes clean through her massive body. The Queen thrashed and screamed, her psychic voice becoming a wail of pain and rage. The Kresh warriors around the chamber began to move erratically, their hive-mind connection disrupting as their Queen died. Fire everything, Chen ordered. Don't let up. They poured fire into the Queen until their weapons overheated, until their ammunition ran dry, until there was nothing left to shoot. The Queen's body shuddered one final time and went still. And across the Kresh home system, across every bioship and every Kresh warrior, a change rippled through the swarm. Without the Queen's guiding intelligence, the individual Kresh were just animals, confused and frightened. The bioships stopped coordinating. The warriors stopped attacking. Some fled. Some simply stopped moving as if their purpose had been taken away. All ships, this is Okonkwo. The Admiral's voice came over every channel. The Hive Queen is confirmed dead. The swarm is broken. All units begin controlled withdrawal and search and rescue operations. The human fleet limped away from the Kresh home system. They'd started with 214 ships. They left with 128. 40% of the fleet, just as the projections had predicted. 372,000 Marines had deployed. 209,000 came back. The numbers were staggering. The cost was almost unimaginable. But the Kresh swarm, the nightmare that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 cycles, was broken. 6 months later, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the memorial garden on Earth, looking at the names carved into the wall. Thousands of names, thousands of people who'd followed her into hell and hadn't come back. Her arm had healed, though it still ached when the weather changed. Her physical wounds had closed. The other kind would take longer. Commander Chen? She turned to see Captain Threll approaching. The Valerian looked older somehow, though she knew his species aged differently than humans. Captain, she greeted him. I didn't expect to see you here. I came with a delegation from the Council, Threll said. They're meeting with your leaders to finalize the alliance treaty. I asked for permission to visit this place first. They stood together in silence, looking at the memorial. We built one too, Threll said quietly, on Valeria Prime, a monument to honor those who saved us. The human names are carved in gold so they catch the light of our sun. That's kind of you, Chen said. It's the least we could do. Threll hesitated. Can I ask you something? Was it worth it? The cost, I mean. So many died. Chen didn't answer right away. It was the question she'd been asking herself every day since the battle. I don't know, she said finally. Ask me in 100 years when I can see how things turned out. Right now it just hurts. But you would do it again? It wasn't a question, but Chen answered anyway. Yes, if the call came tomorrow, if people needed help and we could give it, I'd go. That's what it means to be human. We don't give up even when we probably should. Threll's stress patterns flickered. The Council is both grateful and frightened of you. They're calling you the Galaxy's shield, but also wondering if the shield might turn on them one day. Might we? Chen asked. I don't know. Would you? Chen looked at the memorial again at all those names. We came when you called for help. We fought your war. We paid the price. I'd like to think that says something about who we are. It does, Threll said, but it also shows how dangerous you are. The same strength that saved us could destroy us. You understand why that's frightening? Yeah, Chen said. I do. They stood in silence for a while longer. Finally, Threll spoke again. There's news. From the edge of the galactic rim. Strange signals, energy readings we've never seen before. The architects say something is coming. Something that might make the creche look small by comparison. Chen closed her eyes. Of course there was. The universe didn't give second chances or happy endings. There was always another threat, another crisis, another call for help. When? She asked. Unknown. Could be cycles. Could be tomorrow. And the Council wants to know if Earth will answer the call again. Will you? Threll asked. Chen thought about her Marines, about the ones who'd come back broken and the ones who hadn't come back at all. She thought about the cost of being the Galaxy's shield, the weight of being the ones who stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. I'll have to ask them, she said, gesturing to the memorial. They're the ones who paid the price last time. If I'm going to volunteer us for another war, I need to make sure I'm honoring their sacrifice, not throwing it away. And what do you think they would say? Chen smiled, though it was a sad smile. They'd probably tell me not to be dramatic and just get it done. That's how Marines are. Threll's stress pattern shifted to something that might have been respect or sympathy. The Galaxy is lucky to have you. The Galaxy doesn't know what it has, Chen said. We're still figuring that out ourselves. A week later, the signal came. Not from the Council, but directly from the architects. It was broadcast on every frequency and every language to every species in the galaxy. A darkness stirs beyond the rim, ancient and hungry. The swarm was a warning, not the threat itself.